Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. Remi Guarini is on our show today. Welcome, all the way from New York City.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be chatting.
I'm looking forward to this one. So you are a 3-time Chief of Staff. So can you just give us an overview of how you got yourself into the Chief of Staff role 3 times?
Yeah, so I would say I've been a chief of staff, as you said, 3 times in really different contexts. Just to give a bit of background. So first I was the chief of staff at Maison Kitsune, which is a fashion brand, music label, and hospitality brand. Then I was the chief of staff at Capital Factory, which is a more established VC firm and startup incubator in Austin, Texas, with other Texas locations too. And then I was at Neon, a solo GP early stage VC fund where I was the first hire. And then I recently stepped into a VP of operations role. But in terms of kind of like getting into the roles, getting into my first role, I was actually introduced to the CEO of Maison Kitsune Americas through his wife,
Oh,
who I worked with at Madewell at the time. Um, I had met him once before, like we had gone out to dinner together. Um, and really he took a chance on me and hiring me. I had ever been in a like chief of staff role. I actually really didn't know anything about the role prior to that. But really I was like super hungry for responsibility. I wanted something I could grow into really quickly. The idea of working with the CEO across all aspects of the business was really exciting and appealing to me. And I knew that it was going to be demanding. Like it was 100-hour weeks. I probably made like $5 an hour if you broke down my
wow.
salary to hourly. But I also knew I'd be doing a lot of things for the first time without any roadmap. And that just really excited me, the learning potential. And it really changed my trajectory of my career and kind of led me into my next roles.
It's so funny, like all the chiefs of staff I've had on, it's the connection. It's the I knew his wife, we went out to dinner, knew him socially, and then boom, and then it opened up all these doors. So it really is who you know
Mhm.
sometimes, and it's the person you least expect at times as well. So, um,
100%.
gotcha. How so?
So important.
How did your chief of staff roles build on each other? You kind of alluded to it there, but what was the next piece in the puzzle?
Yeah, so I think like at Kitsune, well, I would say like I feel like every chief of staff role is kind of like getting like an MBA, but paid and without having to take the time off. But you get to get this like really incredible,
Totally.
typically like yeah, like 1, 2, 3 year experience. And each role has taught me definitely something really different. Um, I think like at Kitsune one, I really like built up my ops like chops. It was a fashion brand, like first and foremost, but also hospitality. And like, so I did really every aspect of operations from, HR and people operations to manufacturing and production and logistics on the fashion side.
Were
And,
you learning
and
all this on the fly? Like, did you know any of this before?
I knew some of the fashion, like, kind of logistics and, like, how long it took for certain things to happen because I'd been a design, like, operations
Okay.
kind of coordinator at Madewell before, but a lot of it was quite new. And I will say, like, fashion's one of the most complex businesses from an ops perspective, so it was a really great way to, like, dig in and get experience across all of that, like, in P&L management and everything, and I think that's something that I really, like, learned there. Um, and then I think, I at Capital Factory, it was about like network building and visibility. The CEO was more seasoned. I had to manage up. They would navigate kind of internal politics and be really outward facing with super high profile stakeholders, which was really uncomfortable to me, especially at the time. Like I'm more shy and I don't like to be at the forefront, but it kind of like forced me into that. So I kind of built up that skill set alongside the ops skill set and also got a one-on-one in like all things venture capital through that role. Um, and then I'd say that like Neon kind of like brought all of it together. I couldn't have like done the 0 to 1 without having done, a lot of
Right.
things across all operations before and working with a lot of different people and really like high kind of level people internally out externally before. And so I think like the first two definitely prepared me for this one. And also the first two taught me that I really wanted to be like I want to be a founder one day. I want to build something on my own. And Neon was this opportunity to like get that 0 to 1 experience, build something, but not have to take on the risk. I got paid a salary the whole time. It's not my name on the firm. It's my GP Kimmy's, but still getting to get all that like frontline everything experience from day one,
You get a
day
front row
zero,
seat.
really.
Yeah, you get a front
Yeah.
row seat to it all. I want to highlight something you said, which is you felt uncomfortable going in with like all these senior people. And thank you for sharing that, because I know chiefs of staff that I speak with one-on-one, most of them have that experience, yet a lot of people think they're supposed to kind of front in this way, like, I can take on the world and I'm not scared of anything. I remember walking into my first board meeting, I was like sweating and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like, I'm just a little old me. And these are very professional, very senior seasoned, like everyone knows what they're talking about. So I appreciate you sharing that. And the fact that
Yeah.
it seems like it translated into, I grew from that. I learned how to be in these situations. Now I know about VC stuff. Now I'm in these conversations with the front row seat. So I just wanted to highlight that for listeners, because I know that goes through people's minds.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to do things that scare the crap out of you.
Yes. So you mentioned your GP Kimmy Scott. Can you tell us a little bit about her and how long you've been working with her and all of those good things?
Yeah, so she's incredible. We've been working together now 2 years and like 2 months. And so it's been a little while, but we actually met about a year and a half before I started at Neon. I was at Capital Factory at the time. So I met her through my now husband, actually, which is kind of
Oh,
funny. Yeah, which I'm like, I always love to bring him into the mix. But I was at Capital Factory. I really wanted to connect with like a woman in VC, but also somebody that like came from kind of a non-traditional background. Like I didn't come from banking, PE, like anything like that, consulting into VC. I came through fashion. That's very odd. And so I really wanted to like talk to someone that maybe also had that kind of background that was a bit unique. And Ascanio, my husband, was like, you have to meet Kimmy. She was a founding partner, so she co-founded the firm 8VC, life sciences and technology firm with Joe Lonsdale and a number of other partners. But she, started her first company, a jewelry company, when she was 15. She went to the Fashion Institute of Technology for college, and then she moved into incubating and investing. And so, like, when we talked, we instantly clicked, and it was just like a relationship building combo. But I was like, she was wearing a dress, like, from Hill House Home. That's what I wear right now, but I love the brand. We were, like, geeking out over that, and then really just, like, shared kind of, like, values, ambition, non-traditional paths, and I just respected also, like, she has this sense of being really bold, really smart, and curious, but also and serious, but fun. Like, she enjoys it,
mm,
and that's something that I kind of aspire to out of my, like, career and roles, is to like be really excited and have work be fun, even if it's also serious. And so that's kind of how we met. Um, and then I reached out to her about a year later. So I guess I've known her for technically like 4-ish years or so. And I really feel like a mentorship. Hey, I'm leaving, Austin. I'm leaving Capital Factory. I'm moving back to New York. I want to do something 0 to 1. What do you think? And it just so happened that she was actually thinking about rolling out of 8VC to spin out the investment practice she built there and launch her own firm. And we spent a bunch of time together, and then we're kind of like, hey, let's jump in and do this together. She knew she needed like a operational right hand, and we fit. So that's how I joined and have been there ever since.
wow. Now, how had she had a chief of staff before, or was this her first one?
She had had a chief of staff at 8VC, and actually, like, I think two. One, though, she had for like 5 years, who after about 2 years transitioned into more of an investor role, but still worked like really close with her, which I think is like so important. It's really great to not have to like break an exec in
Yes.
into what a chief of staff is. Yeah.
She knew what she wanted, and she was like, I want you for
Hmm.
that role. That's awesome. Okay. So, and then you mentioned investor. So you're in a dual role. you've got chief of staff hat and then investor hat. Can you talk about how you approach those two roles?
Yeah, so I think like on, the ops side, I've built and then I manage all of the firm operations at Neon, and that really sits with me. And that's kind of a range of different things from, everything with like the tax audit, every kind of vendor that you choose to onboard to launch a fund, but even like business tools, things like that, to like managing the budget and actually managing the audit and the quarterly closes. And there's a lot of financial like work that goes into fund management. And so it's all of that, but it's also like firm building and hiring and, our values and who we are and how we show up. Um, and our main business line is venture investing, right? It's investing in early stage companies, it's partnering with LPs and getting into great deals and generating returns. And really like they each inform each other, right? The investing work is the strategy and what we do, but the operational work needs to be set up and strong for us to execute on that investing work. And being able to kind of like have my hand in both, I actually think informs each other, makes me better as an investor, makes me better as an operator because I know the firm level goals when I'm talking with companies or digging into the portfolio. Um, and then on the other side, I know operationally what's coming. Oh, we have to send a wire next week, so we're about to close on a deal. It kind of shortens the communication timeline. But I would say it's a lot of like definitely multitasking, kind of wearing different hats and being able to context switch a lot. And either you like that or you don't. I happen to like that and it energizes me. And so I've found that it's something that I enjoy doing.
I think that's important to know because for some people it would like drive them insane and I'd be like, I'm burnt
Yeah.
out because this is like frazzling my wires. But for a lot of people it's energizing and it's not a good or bad thing to do that or not, but you have to know that because I hear people going for a chief of staff role and they're like, I kind of like things to be like stable and predictable. I'm like, no, not for you. Go a different direction. But I think,
Anything else?
yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. I'm just saying, like anything else, do you want stable, predictable? Yeah,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
role.
not one thing I'll say for chiefs of staff, never boring. You're never bored. You have you have variety all the time. And it's interesting for you, it sounds like you're doing like the LP kind of fundraising and partnerships and all of those different rounds and you're also doing the portcos. So and those I'm assuming have, different rounds and things to them. So you're doing both ends of the equation there.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you say like it's 50-50 or is it just kind of like it just depends on what the need is or how does that go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, like, I think that my answer depends on the week, honestly.
Totally.
Like, some weeks are like, we just got through our audit, right? Our first ever audit. Great. Like, so glad that's done. But like, that meant that for a time, I was pretty focused on operations because our audit happened at the
Yeah.
same time as a quarterly like close that we have to send out to LPs. At the same time as some other kind of like LP work. So that was like a lot of like ops heavy LP, like communication heavy work.
Yeah.
But then there's times when, we're working on a live deal and we need to move really quickly so we don't lose it, or our portfolio company needs support on something, and I'm jumping in and doing that. So I think the priorities really change week to week. But I would say generally speaking, right now it's about 50-50.
Okay.
Um, it started out more focused on the ops and the fundraising stuff as the firm was getting built up. Now
Sure.
that we've raised a bunch of money and the structure's set up, it's kind of shifted a bit.
And then whatever you're comfortable and willing to say, where does Kimmy spend most of her time?
Yeah, so Kimmy's the GP of the firm, and so big role of hers is fundraising. She's the front-facing person, taking every like fundraising meeting and really like being that relationship manager on a front-facing side, which is a ton of that in itself is a lot of work. And GPs are kind of always fundraising, even if you've closed your fund, you're
Oh
you're
yeah.
kind of never not fundraising. And so that has been a really big focus for her, as well as obviously she's a GP, so anything deal related, she's the ultimate decision maker.
Right.
And so she's getting pulled in as we're doing diligence and creating relationships with founders. And then she holds also all the board seats, for portfolio companies. And because she's an operator and has started a bunch of companies, she's very operationally inclined. And so she digs in with portfolio companies. I would say like likely a lot more than maybe what you would see, kind of across the market. And so I feel like those three things are where she spends her time. And then of course, hiring and meeting candidates and like the firm building things as well. That's something we partner on together.
Yeah, very cool. Let me take one step back. Just we're throwing out acronyms, and I'm aware that some people might
Oh,
not know what we're
sorry.
talking
Yeah.
about. So LPs are limited partners, and in like
Yes.
a very nutshell, they fund the VC firm, and then the VC firm will make investments to nascent companies, and hopefully that they grow. So just like think of three layers: LPs, VC, and then the portfolio companies called portcos. So if you're like listening and you're lost, hopefully that helps you drive this. But what Remi is saying, she works on both the LP side and the portco side, which happens in some cases and not others. And then it sounds like your GP, your principal Kimmy, is very involved in both sides as well. Obviously, fundraising through the different rounds of LPs, and then also being involved in the due diligence for the portcos. Did I have that right?
Yes, absolutely. And also like really like there's a lot of similarities with what she does and what a CEO does. Like think very commercial, driving and winning business.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah. So you and I were talking about this earlier, but I've seen VC firms and some PE firms, honestly,
Oh yeah.
have a chief of staff as an operating partner at the firm level. So sometimes they're chief of staffing for the PE firm or for the VC firm. And then sometimes they have them deployed into their portcos. And I've seen this where you're doing 100% of your time in this one portfolio company for like 18 months. And then I've seen it also where you're going to do fractional work for maybe 3 or 4 of our portfolio companies. And I was wondering, like, have you seen this? Have you thought about this? What are your thoughts on how VC firms use chiefs of staff?
Yeah, great question. And it's cool, interesting too, because I feel like the chief of staff role has grown a lot in BC over like
Yeah.
I don't know the like number of years, but I've just seen it become like more and more common. And I think, I mean, this is always kind of the answer to chief of staff related things, but it really depends on the general partner,
Yeah.
like kind of the ultimate decision maker of the firm and also the structure of the firm. Like is it multiple partners? Is it one GP? Like how does it all kind of work? Um, but at the firm level, especially with like solo GPs or lean teams or younger VC firms, I think a chief of staff with an ops background, especially, could be like extremely impactful
Yeah.
because a lot of VC firms don't always have the management fees. That's basically what your budget is, right? Management fees that you kind of call on a quarterly basis.
Mhm.
Think of that as like your income or revenue in a way. That's what's paying salaries and things like that. That you often don't have the fees to like cover having an HR
Right.
person, having this, every single function. And so if you can have a utility player that can fill those kind of gaps and holes and still create a best in class structure, that provides a lot of value to the team, the portfolio, the like leaders of the firm. um, and I think like in terms of then I've seen more of like that kind of model.
Yeah.
And then I also see, chiefs of staff that are also really like they work with a partner, maybe not the GP that's overseeing the whole firm, but a partner in charge of like the healthcare vertical.
Yeah.
And they are really like the deal kind of like associate to that partner, but also operationally keeping them on track with all of their to-dos for their portfolio or other things within the firm. I've seen a little less in the VC context of VC firms deploying chiefs of staff into the portfolio companies. I see that a bit more in PE, but I'll say I think like generally it's likely better for um, companies, like for portfolio companies, to hire their own chief of staff if that's something that they need.
Yep.
I think it can be tough to like come in and deploy somebody in to do like a certain project or something like that and not be like completely hands-on and involved in everything. I think that's where a chief of staff really adds value and impact. And they'd likely be better served by like that founder knowing exactly what they need as a chief of staff and bringing that person in full time.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of founders have a chief of staff by the time they get to you?
So it depends. We invest seed in seed rounds and Series A rounds, and so seed and is pretty early, and so sometimes and even we do some kind of pre-seed, even though we call it seed, but we still invest. We invest in some companies that are like pre-product, pre-revenue.
Like
Like
the
they're kind of
dream,
at the
an
idea
idea.
phase.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's like it's the founder and they
Yeah.
haven't hired anybody yet. At the Series A stage, which is like they've raised capital, one or two rounds of capital before, and they have a team. That's yes, I'm seeing a lot of chief of staffs like at that stage.
Yeah.
And then chief of staff being a hire sometimes at that like kind of initial funding round stage, but it depends on the type of company. If it's a really highly technical company, they're often maybe bringing on engineering talent
Mm.
or other kind of folks like that. But chief of staff is like a very popular role right now, even at the seed early stage.
For sure. Okay, I'm seeing that too. And then you had mentioned the scenario where maybe a partner in like a healthcare vertical or division has a chief of staff. And then can you say more about like what they would be doing? Are they like let's say healthcare is a main industry or as a main kind of focus for the VC firm? Is that why that partner would have a chief of staff?
Yeah, exactly. So for example, at AVC, Kimmy was one of the like founding, co-founders, founding partners. She was not the GP of that firm. That's Joe Lonsdale, but she had a chief of staff. She for her investment practice, which was healthcare and consumer, and really it's like a deal associate, like somebody sitting on all calls with you, digging in really intensely into diligence and really just being a direct resource because you have like a certain level of deal like velocity and things you're
Mhm.
looking at, that having somebody that's completely in tune with everything that like you're working on and diligence and how you're thinking about the world is really helpful, especially if they have a complementary skill set. So say you like need someone that's quite like quantitative because you're spending a lot more time on the relationship side, it can like allow you to that partner to like multiply their impact by having this person in lockstep with them,
And I'm
if
more
that makes
familiar with
sense.
like the PE deal teams where they would always have an associate who was like the analyst and like the quant guy. And then they would have like the managing director and so forth, where they're more so the relationships. But VCs typically have like 10x the number of portcos. So you're like the amount of companies that you're working with is just massive. And so I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to be a chief of staff with like 200 plus in some cases for some VC firms, like how you even manage that. And I guess it's just altitude of involvement for each portco, but that's a whole different animal when it's 200 in VC land in some cases versus 10, 12 in a fund in PE world. So,
Totally.
wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it depends again also like on like how the firm itself gets involved with companies. Like, do they take board seats? Are they like,
Right.
real what kind of like how do they interact with the company too? And that will define it on top of like just like number of companies as well. And also like the different life cycles. You might have 200 the portfolio, but maybe some of them are, like later stage have exit, are like on their way to exit and you're working really closely to help them with that. Or, you know, companies need different things at different times, I guess is the
Yeah,
other
for
thing.
sure. So if someone's listening and saying, "Oh, okay, I'm interested in potentially being a chief of staff at a VC firm," w- it's there's some similarities to being a chief of staff for one individual organization, and then there's some big differences. What would you say in your experience that people would need to be aware of? Like this is a difference. Like you will still have a principal, you'll still be, seeing across the board and connecting dots and building relationships, but like this is pretty unique to VC world.
That's a good question. I would say like one compared to like an operating company, like you just have different like KPI, like it's kind of a different language one. Like if you're
Yeah.
coming from like me coming from fashion, for us it was like all about like the customer and like average order value and how much time are they spending on the site and what's a conversion and store traffic and all these things. And for VC, it's a whole different set of KPIs and terminology and all of that, which is different. And also you don't necessarily, there's not like a direct you're not like selling a product to a customer directly. You're
Right.
kind of like managing this dual relationship between portfolio companies and LPs. And in some ways, LPs are really your customer because if they're not giving you any money, then you no longer have a fund. Um, but I would say that's a pretty big difference. And then two, the investment work is obviously different. It's project based. You're digging in on something maybe really intensely for a week or two, and then you're moving on, to the next thing versus I'm working on this like rollout across the company that's taking months and months of time. I would say is also quite different. Um, I feel like there's other things those that comes to mind immediately
Yeah,
though.
those were helpful. Do you think that there's more of a financial emphasis? Like you have to at least have a working knowledge of kind of P&Ls or budgets or forecasting or things like that? Or is it like, like it doesn't hurt, but there's certain chiefs of staff in VC firms who deal nothing with that side of the business?
I'm sure that there are like definitely roles in venture where the chief of staff is more of like the pure like I do the HR kind of oversight. I'm doing like working, managing like LP communications and relationships and like internal employee experience and things like that, which that skill set like you don't need as much of that like modeling and P&L skill set. um, and then I think then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is like they really want you to actually be an investor, kind of alongside them. I didn't actually have like I didn't come from baking or PE or anything like that, and I came from like you know understanding and building out at P&Ls and managing P&Ls in a business context. So what I will say is like even if you are like, oh, I haven't, been an investor before or I haven't like done that specific workflow, if you've been an operator and you've like interacted with or built a P&L or, done that kind of work within a company, you have the skill set to be able to figure it out. You don't need to have like, years and years of certain baking or whatever experience, and so I don't
Yeah.
want that to, like, hinder people either.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I didn't know anything. I knew I operated teams and ran teams and did basic stuff like that, but for my experience with, growth equity, usually on the PE side, like, their language are like spreadsheets in some cases. Like, you have to speak finance in order to, like, get through to
Yeah,
them or to ask for budget or to get different approval for things, and so that really, as any chief of staff does, you learn on the fly
yeah.
and you figure it out and like, oh, okay, if you want this, then I'm going to tee it up for you in your language. So I was just curious if that was similar in the VC world. Oh, I'm also interested. So for me, for chief of staff, I had the whole like internal side of things, and then there was the external. Strategic partners, strategic vendors, kind of the media and press and things like this. And I'm wondering, is there that split for you? And like, what does that external piece look like for you and or maybe more so Kimmy?
Yeah, so kind of in terms of like partnerships and things like that, definitely. It's also just like a lot of ecosystem relationships. Like who are
Yeah.
other firms that we have great relationships with, operators in the ecosystem for deal flow, that we have relationships with. So there's a lot relationship mapping in VC is so important. And you spend a lot of time doing that, honestly, no matter what role you're in, because it's so relationship based. So I would say like that is definitely a huge part of just like VC in general. It's been a huge part of this role. And when it comes to things like partnerships, that's something that sits with me and with Kimmy. And for us, that's been to date like less of a focus, right? Because we've been focused on the fundraise and the launch and everything like that. And it will become kind of more of a focus as time goes on. But where we've kind of had partnerships is, more so also like with student organizations on college
Oh.
campuses where Kimmy can go and speak. But what that also does is it gives us access to a great group of like emerging entrepreneurs that we can create relationships with, that we can help get into VC, or place in a job. And so there's a lot of work that we do around that. And then also a lot of events. We've done a number of events, either with other firms or with companies for operators and founders and investors and things like that. And then on the PR side, different firms take different approaches. We've decided to be this is really driven by Kimmy, this strategy, which I think is really smart. We've decided to take kind of a backseat and not have a massive like PR push. Um, or that's not like a huge focus for us yet. We're gonna like have our website like launch officially in our LinkedIn, but we're not gonna do a massive push behind that because we're like still young and building, and that's not to say that we won't in the future. But that's kind of how we want to approach things from the start, is to be a little bit more kind of like heads down and incognito. But when we do get there, that's definitely something that I'll be very involved in, but that Kimmy will direct the strategy of.
Gotcha. And if you're talking to maybe an aspiring chief of staff or a current chief of staff, but looking specifically to get into VC, what kind of advice or just kind of lessons learned or things that you would want someone to know going into that?
If you don't have operating experience, get it. Like it will make you better for your like GP, to your portfolio companies, to the like firm as a whole. Um, Again, like a lot of firms have to operate without, a lot of operational support internally. And so having that experience and being able to provide some of that, I think could be actually a big differentiator um, for VC. And so also it'll make you a better investor. It'll make you able to actually have like great impact with your portfolio. So I'd say that. And then I'd say like spend a lot of time like one talking to a lot of people. Like I probably had hundreds of people that I talked to, alongside Kimmy as I was deciding kind of what was next. Um, and that's like kind of how you get there in VC, because there's not always, it's a little bit occlusive, like jobs aren't always posted.
Yeah.
It can sometimes be challenging to know where to start. Things usually happen through people, and they're usually the key. And so even if you're like, oh, I don't want to go get another coffee, like go get that coffee because you never know. Um, and then I'd say like really starting to zero in on like kind of what kind of fund would you also want to work for, as you go through that conversation, that process of having all those conversations. Like, do you want to work for a solo GP where there's really like one person in charge? Do you want it to be an early platform where maybe you have more ability to grow because it's less top heavy? Do you want to go to a really established firm because you want to like learn kind of from the best of the best, or you like a more hierarchical, less flat environment? Do you want to be really early stage, later stage? What areas excite you? It's just like a company. Like if you are working at a company where you're not passionate about the thing that you're selling, it is quite hard to work hard for that company. And
Yeah.
similarly, I think that transcends to VC too, where if I wasn't interested in healthcare and consumer companies, it'd be really hard to talk to these founders all the time and to underwrite businesses. So that's important too. And then, yeah, I think just like knowing your own strengths, are you that operator? Are you an extremely like, are you a connector? Do you have a great like ability to network? Are you really strong with numbers? And then like find that firm that's looking for that to match their needs.
Yeah. So I think just to recap what you said, like there's so many different kinds of VC firms out there. And there's like boutique firms that specialize in one super niche area. And then there's ones that are more broad. There's different stages, like you said. If like the board seat makeup is important to you, some people have like policies around how they do that with all of their investments. So kind of filter and pick the ones that you want to go in that direction. And then I love your advice of like, what are you good at? What are you naturally good at? What are you the go-to person for other people for? And like what lights you up and makes you excited to go work on something? And if you kind of do the Venn diagram for those two things, whatever's in the middle is probably a good direction for you to explore. So I love that
Yes.
advice. If you are talking to a GP or a principal who has a chief of staff in a VC firm, and it's like some of these decisions are really high level, they're impactful, it's high pressure, moving fast, what would you say in terms of advice for managing a chief of staff?
I think like just build trust early, prioritize that. I think that the chief of staff role only works if like the chief of staff is fully in the loop and they're empowered to act and give them the context. Don't just give tasks. There's a lot going on. I know, like, it's a very hectic, busy environment, but context really matters, um, and it's gonna make them better. And then I'd also say, like, investing in their growth. You know, student staff roles can burn people out if you're not careful. And I also think generally chiefs of staff tend to be kind of like people pleasing. We want to help. It's a service oriented role, right? And sometimes a little bit of perfectionist. Um, and so it can be really challenging. You're working a lot and you always have to be on and you're involved in really high impact things. So if your manager, comes to you and is also like investing in you, thinking about helping think about where you're headed next and not just like, what can this person do for me today? I think that goes a really long way too.
Yeah. Context, it can take an extra 30 to 90 seconds, but that time can save you so much in both like production time and like effectiveness, quality, just back and forth. So I love the fact that you mentioned context. And then is there anything that you and Kimmy do just to kind of make sure that you're in open communication and you're singing off the same sheet of music? I mean, I remember with my principal, CEO, and our COO, when we would get stressed, we'd be like, let's just go out and play some top golf. And we would go out
I
in the
love that.
evening, just go like play some fun, like silly, stupid top golf, eat really bad nachos and, drinks and just kind of spend time together doing something that we're all pretty bad at, but have fun doing. So I'm just wondering, is there anything like that with you and Kimmy?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, like, I probably talk to her more than anyone else for like constantly in communication, and I think that's just the nature of the role. But I would say, like, yes, doing those things that are, a little bit more personal go a long way. Like for us, that's a lot of times like talking about like the next like clothing drop at Hill House, like what's coming out and what are you gonna buy and what am I gonna buy? And we're both interested in fashion. So like, oh, did you see this new collection that came out? And kind of like taking 10 minutes and doing that, versus banging our heads against the wall about something else. Or going on a walk, going to grab lunch, like getting time kind of out of the office together too. Um, but I find that like I think the relationship building at the front where you have that trust and you're able to feel comfortable, like communicating, kind of getting what you need in any moment can also alleviate, some of that. And so, like, for example, I feel very comfortable even if it's like 8 p.m., but if I really need an answer on something, just calling Kimmy and being like, hey, sorry, 5 minutes, like need this answer. And she gets that and is open to that. But I think it's hard to do that unless you first build up the relationship and the trust and empower the person to do that. And she empowered me to do that, like from the beginning. So I think that's important too.
It is. The upfront work is so important because it sets the foundation. And then it's like, I know that it's important if Remi is calling me at 8 p.m. at night. It's not just like I'm ringing my bell for
I'm
no
not just
reason.
calling you.
Yeah. Beautiful. Remi, as we wrap up here, is there anything else across all the things we talked about, VC, chief of staff, fashion, neon, that you would want people to know?
No, just that I think the chief of staff role is really special. I think like if you're curious and if it seems exciting to you, like go for it. I think it can change the trajectory of your career. I think you can accelerate it. And I think there's also an incredibly like amazing group of chiefs of staff, across industries that are all like really ready to dig in and talk and help, especially somebody that's newer to the role. It's pretty awesome like how kind and like open most chiefs of staff are. And so I'd also say like don't be afraid to like reach out to that person on LinkedIn that you're curious about their career path and kind of talk through it or something like that. And I'm always open to that too.
Beautiful. And last question here: if someone is kind of like, oh, like neon, and that kind of sounds interesting, I might want to reach out. Like, what types of people would you be excited to partner with, and what types of people should reach out to you or Kimmy or Neon?
Great question. I mean, definitely like anyone that's looking to break into VC, um, or like kind of career, like make a career shift, even if it's not right into VC. Both Kimmy and I spend time each week, like individually meeting with people, making career changes and helping make intros and think about what's next because both people have both taken chances on both of us. rather. And so we like to do that and kind of be thoughtful that way. So I'd say that generally, I'd say definitely a consumer, early stage, like consumer healthcare founders. Would love to meet folks that in those realms. And then also, we spend a lot of time on this, like a side car fund called Neon Pink, which is we built to kind of close the confidence gap and educate women on VC investing, get more women on cap tables. And so we do like quarterly kind of education and like roundtables around like VC memos, like VC 101 language, what's like safe document, things like that. So anyone that's interested in like learning more about angel investing or VC in general, always happy to chat with them too. And
That's
yeah.
that's fantastic. I love that name too. So we'll have all of that information in the show notes. But Remi, this has been fantastic. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.